welcome back to Double Down University. I'm back with you guys with another NFL prospects video, and today I will be doing a 2 to 3 part series on all the games that's coming on today. I'm gonna break this video down with just the London game. This is just solely on the London game, and then I will drop another video for like the 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock slate, as well as prime time. I may split those videos up as well. But this video is just focused solely on the London game, so let's get into it. First prop I have for you guys is Bijan Robinson over 65.5 rushing yards. The next one is Christian Kirk over 51.5 receiving yards. The next is Calvin Ridley over 64.5 receiving yards, as well as Kyle Pitts, and we're going to hedge him. So pretty much is one pick, but you can kind of pretty much just put one in one card and then one in the other card to kind of hedge him. Because you just, he may hit both, and then he may just hit one out of the two. So I have his receiving yards over 33.5, as well as his receiving targets over 5.5, and I will get into why in a second. But looking at the game, it's a low total at 42.5, so they don't expect too many points to be scored. As well as Jacksonville is a 3-point favorite as well, and then looking at the box scores, I like to look at the box scores from previous games and look at personnel and how they pretty much line up. So the Falcons use a lot of 12 personnel, and basically what 12 personnel is, it's just a 1 running back, 2 tight ends, and 2 receiver sets. So that means you have 2 receivers, you have 1 tight end, and then you also have 2 tight ends, I should say, and 1 running back. So more than likely it will be Bijan in the backfield. You have Kyle Pitts, and then you have Jonnu Smith as your 2 tight ends. One could be you can use it as a blocking formation for running the ball. But as if you watch the Falcons, you know that they're pretty much a predominantly run first team, and they try to set everything else up off of the run. And if the run doesn't work, as you've seen last week against Detroit, like they just pretty much are stagnant as a team. And they're not a big drop back and pass type of team, but when they got down, they had to do that, and that's never a good thing with Ritter. If he's throwing the ball any more than 30 plus times a game, then it's not going to end well. It's not going to be a good result for the Falcons, just the way that their offense is set up. So, but one thing that was concerning that I noted too was that Drake London, his snap or his target percentage has dropped dramatically over the last couple weeks. But that could be with, the addition of Bijan Robinson as well as Jonnu Smith as well. Being able to get those targets. As you can see, Jonnu, he had 8 targets. He had his average yards is 56 yards. He had 5 catches for 37 yards. Kyle Pitts had 5 catches for 41 yards. And then Bijan had 4 catches for 27. So that kind of ate into Drake's production. But that was concerning. And then also with Bijan, he's on the up and up. As you can see, his snap share has increased from week 1 at 63% to week 2 72%, and week 3 last week at 80%. And then he's also seen at least 5 targets in every game, placing him with Kyle Pitts as tied for the team total or team lead in targets, which is 17. And it says Pitts maintains his lead amongst tight ends and team air share, but it's a small pie, and his targets remain forced and inefficient. So that's why I want to kind of go with hedging Pitts, because for one, Desmond Ritter, he's not an super accurate quarterback. So, a lot of if he's just throwing the ball to him and his incompletions, or it's just, he dropped the ball or whatever, is still getting credited as a target. But if he does, come up with, let's say he gets 6 targets, or last week he had 9. So let's say he gets 6 targets and he gets, 40 yards out of 6 targets, you cash both of them. But just in case, Desmond Ritter is inaccurate, and, he throws him the ball his way and he doesn't catch the ball, then you still get credited for that. So that's a good hedge piece for Pitts. And then also with Pitts, let me see if I can pull him up one more time. RotoWire. Let's see. RotoWire. Let's do Pitts. Cool. But with Pitts, he's covered this line pretty much in 2 out of the 3 games. As you can see, at 44 yards in week 1 against Carolina with only 2 catches. And then he had 5 catches last week for 41 yards. So he has potential to go over this. And then like his targets are kind of sketchy, like 5, 3, and then 9. But I think that he should continue to see more targets in this offense because they need to establish him to be able to just make it easier, make life easier for Ritter, and he can have somebody he can go to as a safety blanket when the outside receivers aren't winning their routes, because they don't have super dynamic outside receivers. Like they have London and they have like Mac Hollins, who's like should be like a number 4 receiver on the average team, but being as though they don't have the threats outside to be able to threaten a defense, they have to rely on, getting the ball to their tight ends. And then also Ritter, his average yards per attempt is 5.3, so that tends to lead me to believe that he's throwing a lot of short routes, to whether it's his wideouts or his tight ends, where he's not waiting for them to get down the field. As you can see, like yards per target for Pitts week 1 was 14.7. That's why he got 44 yards, because he ran deeper down the field to be able to catch those passes on 3 targets. And then as you look at this, 3.0 week 2 and 4.6 week 3. So that just shows you he's not running deep routes at all, but he's getting targeted in those routes that he does run. So I like Pitts in this situation. And then moving on to Bijan. The one thing about Jacksonville, like when I looked at their numbers, they have really, really good numbers as far as defending the run. As you can see here, they're 6th in opposing yards. Opposing yards per rush at 3.4, which is 6th in the NFL. They have they allow 24.7 rushes per game, which is 10th in NFL, and then also yards per game, which is 84. Which is 7th. But when I looked at their schedule and I looked at who they played, it's not really impressive. Like, for instance, they played against the Colts without Jonathan Taylor. So they played against some Walmart cart pushers with Deion Jackson, Evan Hall, Jake Funk, like those guys. Like they're no threat. And then if you guys know Kansas City and you watch them play, you know that they're not a run-first team. They're not a team that relies on the run. They don't, even if the run works early on, they don't stick with it. So they're not a predominantly run team. They never faced a predominantly run team. And in Houston, they don't have a great offensive line. Pierce, he's their best back, but I think they limited him to like 2.2 yards per carry in that game, if I'm not mistaken. And Singletary was actually the one that had a bigger game as far as rushing wise, as you can see, at 41 yards, and Pierce only had 31 yards. So if you average that out, let's see. So we have 31 yards for Pierce, divide that by 14 carries. It's like 2.2 yards per carry, which is not great. He did have a rushing touchdown, which probably was like a short red zone touch. So none of these guys are threatening to, their defense. So they should be top 10 facing these type of backs like this. But they're going up against Bijan, and Bijan is a different breed. He's cut from a different cloth, and he's special. And I think that they've never went against anybody like him so far. And then also the Atlanta offensive line is really good as well. So. And he only has to get how many yards? It's 57 yards, I believe. 57, 55, and 67. I mean 66. My bad. So not bad. Gets 30 yards a half. He should be able to go over this line. He has went over this line only once so far this year, which is not really a concern, because if they're going to have any shot at winning this game, they're going to have to get him touches, and they're going to have him to be successful. Now, another way you can go to is his receiving yards, as he's covered his 26.5 line every game so far in his career. And then he like I mentioned previously, he does get at least minimum of 5 targets, so he will get his fair share of targets. You could mix it with his rushing and receiving. The only thing with that prop that I don't like about rushing and receiving is that if he does, let's say he gets negative 10 yards or so, like they sack him, they get him behind the line of scrimmage and they tackle him for a loss, you're getting discredited for the receiving, so that's why I don't like combining the two unless you know that their offensive line is solid and they're no threat for tackles for loss. Like the defense that they're going against is no threat to tackle him for a loss or huge losses, I should say, to kind of negate, all of the positive of getting the receiving yards. So I really like Bijan in this spot. Christian Kirk, reason why I selected him is mainly because of Zay Jones. So Zay Jones is normally in their 2 receiver sets when they play 12 personnel, where they have 2 tight ends, 1 running back, and 2 receivers or 3 receivers, however many they want on the field. He is particularly in those positions, Zay Jones, and then they also have Calvin Ridley as the second receiver. But in those formations, when Zay Jones is active, Christian Kirk comes off the field, because he's more of that slot type of receiver in that instance. So with Zay Jones being gone, he's going to have to be pushed up into that role, and you will see an increase in his snap count. So I really, really like him in this position to be on the field more often than he has been if Zay Jones was to play. So he was rolled out, so that's a big boost to him. And I just think that this line is just super disrespectful to him, just the type of receiver he is. Yeah, he didn't do well week 1, but as you've seen, when he has to step up and he has to be in a bigger role, a larger role, he does, what he needs to do. Like week 2 against Kansas City, I actually had that prop for you guys, and he had 11 catches for 110 yards, and then last week he had 4 catches for 54 yards, and I think all we need out of him is 52 yards, if I'm not mistaken. 52 yards. So it's it's feasible. And then 2, he has that ability, yards after the catch. So I really, really like this spot for him. And then let's take a look at let's see. So he predominantly lines up in the slot. It's 126 snaps in the slot. So he will get more chances to be more of an outside receiver. He's going up against like Trey Flowers and D. Alford, so they don't have the greatest grades. I know AJ Terrell is one of their best receivers, and I think he will kind of have that matchup with best cornerbacks, I should say, not receivers, but he should be matched up with Calvin Ridley. But I also like his matchup with Calvin Ridley as well. And moving on to Calvin Ridley, since we talked about him, so he is going to he's pretty much in a revenge spot. So he didn't leave Atlanta in the way he wanted to leave Atlanta, the way they traded him at the trade deadline last year. So I think this is personal for him. I think that knowing Doug Peterson, because I'm an Eagles fan, so knowing him, I'm pretty sure he will heavily game plan for Ridley to get him touches early on and often to get him involved in the offense and try to show his worth to his his former team. He's had issues with drops this year. He leads the league in drops. I think it's 3. So he leads the league in most drop passes this year. So he left a lot of meat on the bone with a lot of his plays. As you can see, week 1 he went off 8 catches, 101 yards, 1 touchdown. Week 2, 2 catches, 32 yards. So and then he also had 8 targets. So that shows you right there, either it's an incomplete pass or he's just dropping the ball. But the target share is there. Anytime he's getting between minimum of 7 targets a game, I will bank on him to get those yards and that amount of production. So I really, really like him in this spot, especially being a revenge spot. Another way that you can play him as well to hedge is you can play him first half for receiving yards, or you can play him first half for fantasy just in case he scores, or he gets I wonder what his fantasy is, but in case he scores, or if he gets a couple catches for 30 yards, that should pretty much go over his fantasy. Let's see what his fantasy is. His fantasy is 7. So basically if he catch a touchdown pass, that's pretty much he'll tie his projection on fantasy. And if he gets 2 catches and a touchdown, he pretty much goes over. Or if he gets any sort of 3 catches or 4 catches for 30 yards or 30 plus yards, he should be able to go over this fantasy score, or at least tie it. But I like to look long term because the game is going to be close. It's not going to be a blowout, so I wouldn't really look too much the first half. But first half, just for the simple fact that they may try to get him involved early and often, you can kind of knock that prop out of the way early on, then have to wait for him to get to 75 yards full game, just in case, it gets ugly or something. Let's say Atlanta turned the ball over or something like that, and the game, they just run the clock out. So another prop too that I'll give you guys too that I was eyeing too, but it didn't make my list, was Travis Etienne's rushing attempts. Excuse me. Yes, rushing attempts, because I believe that they should be up in this game. And I really like the rushing attempts. Well, his rushing attempts, because if they're up in the game, they should feed him. His fantasy, I wouldn't touch it because for the simple fact of lately they've been getting Tank Bigsby a lot of carries in the red zone, especially inside the 10 and inside the 5. And Etienne hasn't had a carry inside the 10-yard line so far this year. So with fantasy, you're probably going to have to score a touchdown, or he's going to have to break one before he gets to the red zone in order for him to be able to go over that fantasy. So I wouldn't really touch his fantasy too much. More so just rushing attempts or just rushing yards overall. I would touch either of those two. But moving on to my last but not least prop is the Pinions punts over 4.5. Reason being, in their first game against Carolina, they punted the ball 7 times. And then last week, they punted the ball 6 times. And then against Green Bay, they punted the ball once. But the reason I like this prop is because when I looked at their team total overall, let's see if I can go to it and show you guys. So Atlanta's team total is actually 19.5. So that's really, really low. And as you can see, Jaguars team total is 22.5, so they project them to score at least 3 touchdowns. So with that being said, of them having a team total of only 20 points, that means that should lead to a lot of drives where they don't score, and what that means is punting the ball back to the other team. So I think that is at 4.5 for a reason. I think it's a feasible line. Like, you get 3 punts in the first half, and then you get 2 punts in the second half. That should cover the line. But I think I really, really like that prop, just for the simple fact that they're not going to be scoring a boatload of points. It's different if they were the favorite and they were projected to have like 28 points or 27.5 points. That would be a difference, because that means that they're going to be having productive drives as opposed to stalling out and not having productive drives. So, but of the two teams, I think that they punt the ball more than the Jaguars do. I know the Jaguars, their line is at 4. But I like the 4.5 better, because that tells you that they will have to punt the ball more. So I really, really like Pinions punts, and then also Jacksonville. I like their defense, and they can force pressure. Now, they don't have a bunch of sacks. I think they have probably let's see how many sacks they have. I don't want to lie to you guys. Let's see, team sacks stats. See, passing, defense, sacks per game. Let's look at this. So their sacks per game, Jacksonville. So they average 1.7. It's not bad. It's actually middle of the pack. Right around the middle of the pack. So not bad. They're not, a heavy sack team, but you don't have to be in order to force a punt. You can just stall them out on 3 and out. And then especially, like I mentioned with you guys, is that they are a big, one-dimensional type team. If the running game doesn't go well, they're going to struggle. So I just think that, Bijan will get his rushing attempts and he'll get his yards, but I don't think that they go far. Like, he'll get chunk yardage and stuff like that, but I don't think they go far enough for him to be able to sustain drives with just him running the ball. So I really, really like those props, and I'll go over them again. I have Bradley Pinion over 4.5 punts. We have Kyle Pitts over 5.5 receiving targets, as well as Kyle Pitts over 33.5 receiving yards. Calvin Ridley over 64.5 receiving yards. Christian Kirk over 51.5 receiving yards, as well as Bijan Robinson over 65.5 rushing yards. I appreciate you guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will be back with more content later on for the 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock slate. So be tuned, or stay tuned for that. I appreciate you guys.